Hi everyone, so the latest hotfixes are out, including the fix to Andariel's Visage. If you hadn't seen that in the mid-season update, they wanted to buff that item and make it now proc at a range and give it more damage. So that was not actually implemented in the mid-season patch, but now it is. And I went back in and tried out my Andariel's Sorc Fury craft, which you can see in action here right now. This is a setup I had already talked about in another video. It looks like this here. I have a planner, I can link that. But basically the idea is we scale the Andariel slot as much as possible on a class that is not a rogue. So I figured, where can we do that? And I tried it on a Sorc, because you have a bunch of generic damage increases and you can actually produce a lot of lucky hits. Sorc in general has great affinity with lucky hit scaling. So I figured maybe we can make something work. And this is what you see here in action right now. Now, it's not the greatest build out there, nor did I expect it to be, but I was actually kind of like cruising through like 85s to 90 pits with ease with this setup, and it actually feels really fun because I made this a chain lightning build. So the idea was I tried to get as many hits as possible. Chain lightning has a pretty good aspect for that, for example, and we have also scaling through unstable currents. We can get the extra attack speed, we can get the extra random spells that fly around and can also trigger lucky hits, for example. So that is what I was working on here, and it actually feels super fun to play. Now, as I mentioned, not the strongest build. However, my setup is also not really fully optimized just yet. I do have a bunch of 0 greater apex gear. I have not masterworked everything up to 12. Most of the items were like 4 or 8 here at that point. So there is definitely room for improvement. And I think getting to a point where you can comfortably farm 90s or even higher is actually feasible. Now, does this beat like Frozen Orb, for example? Yeah, not necessarily. And it does have a weakness of just being not very good against the boss. I tried to include as much boss damage as I could, but at least once you get to the point where you no longer reliably stagger the boss and kill them in like, let's say 3 staggers or so, the boss damage does start lacking a little bit. On 85s, that was still kind of fine. So for example, if you go back to the previous run here, I reached the boss in like, let's say 2.5 minutes or so, and then also took it down in maybe half a minute or something like that at this point. But if you go a little bit too high, then the bosses become a bit too tanky. I was able to see up to like 10+ million poison ticks on my Andariels here, and as I mentioned, there is room for improvement. I think it can definitely get to the point where I do roughly maybe double that, like 20 million ticks, which would be something like around 40 million DPS plus change from whatever you get from your crackles and your chain lightnings and so on. So most of the hit damage is kind of irrelevant in the setup. It's mostly intended to scale the Andariel slot as much as possible. But you see here, in stagger phases, you can actually do significant damage output. And as long as you don't go too high and then the bosses cannot be staggered, you will be fine. So it was actually really a blast to play, and I wanted to kind of draw attention to this again because I really enjoyed it. Playing a chain lightning build is something I've really liked back in season 1 when we had the Malignant Hearts with the Omni Power Heart, where you were shooting these multiple chain lightnings at once, which was amazing. So like 5 chain lightnings at once, and I really loved that build. So it kind of brought me back a little bit to that. If you want to see more on the setup, I'm not going to go into all of the details just now because I have actually made a video about this, so you can go check that out for more. But TLDR, Andariels, lots of generic damage increases, lots of lucky hit. We try to scale the cooldown a little bit for unstable currents, and then we spam chain lighting. So we can get to the point where, at least if we start as guys together with the Andariels and the Tasha ring, we can actually just spam chain lightning without really worrying about resources. We have a bunch of cooldown reduction from ice blades, for example. Here's a Paragon board that I tried to optimize with for this Andariel's Visage proc. So lots of generic damage increases, basically. One thing to pay attention to is that you have only Flame Shield as a source of fire damage in the setup. So for example, for the Elementalist Glyph and also for your Tarasha stack, you have to activate Flame Shield kind of offensively, occasionally at least. But other than that, kind of like perma barriers with ice armor and, you know, protection, passive, and so on. So I made this actually fairly tanky. In this planner, I have 31k life. On my life character, I actually have more than that, which is a bit overkill, I think. So you can get away with less life and, you know, for example, get more glass cannon ranks, get some other like lucky hit and attack speed on your gear. For example, in this clip right now, I didn't have any passive on my amulet, so that alone can be a huge improvement to your damage done, for example. So there's definitely a lot of room to grow here from where I am at currently. But this is how the setup works. If you want to try it out for yourself, you can try this. There's also other stuff that I have been experimenting with briefly. For example, putting Andariels on just an existing frozen orb build. And you can actually also reach like a few million damage dot ticks or so without really optimizing anything else around it. So there might also be a way to play, for example, frozen orb with Andariels, and then maybe tweak the stats, tweak the paragons a little bit to include some more of those generic damage increases instead of, for example, cold damage that I had in my build. So there might be a bit of a possibility there, but I think if you really try to get the most out of this item, then I think I'm kind of on a good track here. Either way, even if it's not really the best build out there, it was pretty fun to play, and you can farm Unique Iron just fine with this, and everything else in the game just works as well. So it was a lot of fun. I will experiment more of this, try to min-max this a little bit more and see where we get. Maybe you can even go all the way to like, you know, a 90, a comfortable farming position, or maybe all the way to close to 100. So let's see. Now, of course, no one should have any illusions. Andariel's Sorc is somewhat of a meme. If you compare it to the rogues just do like 100 times the amount of damage or so. If you compare it to this, like rogues can reach like 1 billion on a tick or so, and not just like 10 million or 20 million or something like that. Rogues just have somehow like insane scaling. I'm actually kind of surprised by how much it is, to be honest, in terms of how much of a gap there is. So it seems a little bit fishy. But either way, rogues have a way stronger Andariel's option. So that should be said. But I do have a really good time playing this Andariel's Sorc. And since Sorcs in general are kind of like on a low bar to meet, basically, in terms of your DPS output, it seemed okay. So that's it for my summary of the field testing of the Andariel's Sorc. I have the link in the description for the planner, so if you want to try to build this yourself, then go ahead and, well, have some fun with it. So, hope you enjoyed this video here, and see you guys next time.